out. The gag was always there. And I think it's so typical of him that his last words were a gag. The nurse was preparing the hypo after he had his heart attack, and he played it beautifully. He looked solemn, and he said, "I wish I was skiing now." And the nurse was rather startled and says, I didn't know you skied, Mr. Laurel. And he said, "No, I don't, but it's I'd much rather be doing that than doing what I'm doing now, getting a lot of needles stuck into me." And he died a few minutes later.
In 1929, sound came to motion pictures, and the immortal Cuckoo song was born. Its composer, Marvin T. Hatley.
And I made this little silly tune as a radio time signal to count the hours. And Stan Laurel came up and heard it and says, "That tune's for me. That's just what I want. That little cuckoo part's just what I like." See that? So he says, "I'd like to use that for my theme." I says, "Well, swell." So then I showed him how it was put together. This represents Stan Laurel. Supposed to be cuckoo. Same thing over. Not very bright. He's dull. He's stupid, see? That's what that means, stupid. And the big one, Babe, is very dominating, see? Arrogant. He's the boss. Like a bugle call in the army, see? So we put them together.
You start to smile right away. Just the minute it comes on the screen and hear boop, 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 you always started to smile.
It was 1932, and they decided to embark on a tour of the United States and the continent. They were in for an unexpected, pleasant surprise.
At Chicago, they were overwhelmed by the people who came to see them. When they got to New York, it was even more astounding. Wherever they went, there were crowds and the newsreel cameramen, and they simply had no idea that they were so popular. And in a sense, it made them even more insular than they had ever been. And they tended to be insular because Stan's whole life was a studio. And once the shooting day was over, then into the cutting room, worked very closely with the film. And with Babe, it was out to the golf course. He had his friends at Lakeside Country Club.
The boy who made good revisited his father in the North Country. And whenever they came over in the later years, it was always the same story.
There were mobs of people at every station. And throughout Italy and France, both, they have Laurel and Hardy masks. We'd never seen them. So lining up at the station are all of these people. Half of them are wearing the Laurel masks and half of them Hardy masks. Then from Marseille on the way down along the Riviera into Rome, at every station, the train would stop. We found out later what had happened. The engineer had phoned the station ahead and said Laurel and Hardy are aboard. So the train would stop at every station, and here are these mobs of people. They're reaching through the train windows to shake hands, just to touch them. He was a very, very sensitive, a very sincere person. So I had a wonderful life with him, an exciting life. He went to the club for his golf, and he loved his home life. He did carpentry work around the house. He made most of our garden furniture and made little things for me, like my dressing table, vanity chair, and things of that kind. He was really a gourmet. He loved food, but he was very selective in his food.
I think I'll start our place with a bowl of clam chowder.
Chowder, sir.
A large porterhouse steak smothered with onions.
Yes, sir.
A baked potato, lima beans, buttered beets, a combination salad. Now for dessert.
He hated being fat. And it's something that too many people didn't know that, because with other people he would just laugh and say, well, that's the way, that's my bread and butter. I have to be big, you know, on that, and he would ridicule it in that way. But with me, he would, I knew how he felt, and he would, many times, he would stand and he'd walk up behind me. For instance, I'd be at my dressing table, or I'd be in front of a mirror, and he'd walk up behind me, and he'd say, look at me, look at me. How could you love a great big fat man like me? I mean, that's something I've never told anyone before in my life, but it was, I mean, it's one of those little personal things that do happen between a man and a wife. He never considered himself a comedian. He thought he was a straight man for Stan, and it always amazed him when anyone thought he was a comedian, because he felt that he was just the big boob to make Stan look good.
What they worked out was this peculiar chemistry whereby each made the other funnier. It's an unselfish kind of comedy, and I'm amazed that, as far as I know in their career, they didn't have rows over who was getting the odd laugh.
Oh, they couldn't have been more friendly. I mean, at one time I had trouble with Hardy, and I told him he was, I had canceled his contract, and I knew he wasn't going to let me cancel his contract. But Laurel cried, you know what I mean, because he thought that I meant it.
You certainly did.
Well, I didn't.
You certainly did.
Let's put our brains together so that we can forge ahead. Remember, united we stand. Divided we fall.
He had a series of heart attacks, and then he had a massive stroke, and he was an invalid from then on till the end came. Stan came to see him several times. Sometimes Babe would recognize him, sometimes he wouldn't, because at times he would be lucid, at times he wouldn't. So, but Stan came, and he would come every few months to see him. Of course, by that time, Stan had had a stroke himself.
The reason people laughed at it was because there's a child and everyone watching it. Those that didn't laugh didn't acknowledge it. Those that didn't think it was funny were those that didn't dream.
I remember first falling in love with two men who were not adults pretending to be children, but two characters who were children pretending to be adults.
What are you doing?
Just playing.
The small child of 4 being led by the child of 5.
Just because you have the mind of a 4-year-old child, you don't need to display it.
And yet still inside the womb of being children. They always stayed inside that circle, you know, and never got further than that.
Stan. He was an observer of life, and he thought that life was so very beautiful, and yet he would never allow it to become other than beautiful by acknowledging the reality of it, and the simplicity of it, and the stupidity of it, and the anger of it, the joy of it, the hate of it. And he was able to transpose those feelings into the most simplistic views for the masses to understand. He was very, very amused at how people mistreated life and that they didn't enjoy it.
You dirty double-crossing squealers. Ain't a jail in this country strong enough to hold me. But when I do get out, I'll break off your legs and I'll wrap them around your neck.
Stop that crying! Now this is your last chance. If you don't tell us where that ring is, over you go.
Oh, we can't tell you. We don't know where it is till we have it.
How can we tell you if we don't remember?
Maybe this will help you remember.
No.
You're charged with vagrancy. Are you guilty or not guilty? Not guilty, Your Highness. On what ground?
We went on the grounds. We were sleeping on a park bench.
And Laurel and Hardy are a little bit appalled each time they meet such persons. How does such a person come about?
Thank you, sir. To get out of town! And never let me set eyes on you again.
Oh!
Chef.
What are you going to do? Cook something?
Yes, I'm going to cook his goose.
But there comes a time when the cup of humiliation is running over and they just simply have to hit back.
And this is the usual starting point of a comedy technique that they may well have invented, but which they've certainly used in a masterly way in half a dozen comedies. One could define it as reciprocal destruction, and it has since become a classic comedy routine.
Little by little, each character destroys the other. They pull a bit off his house, he pulls a piece off their car.
I know exactly what is going to happen, and I'm fascinated to see the process by which they're going to make it happen.
There's a ordered logic to it, which is the world of the zany, of the impossible.
They're like two little children who wanted the fight to happen, it seems to me. Little kids want that fight to happen. They put the chip on the shoulder and say, knock it off. And then they wait, and that's what they did. Only they took it to gargantuan dimensions.
It is a ritual because it's recognized as being a form of a game. You are observing the other person's right to have a turn. It's my turn now, Mummy.
It looks vicious, but of course the secret is that it is not. Nobody really gets hurt. And this slow increment of indignity upon indignity is something that I suppose we always want to see happening to other people, and we rather enjoy it in that sense.
It's unbearably beautiful because here's the thing that deep down we all want to do. Now what made me laugh about this, that this destruction is watched by a crowd of spectators who gathered, and every time they went across there, all the spectators would go and watch and made no comment. And then they pulled a bit of the house off, and then all the spectators would rush back here like this and watch this. And that's what knocked me out, that the public would stand by and watch this destruction going on, and they'd prove that man was an idiot.